It was an ordinary afternoon when Nadia's phone buzzed with a notification. She was sitting at her small kitchen table, sipping on a cup of tea, when she saw the name on the screen. Dominic Harper. Her first thought was that it must be a mistake. Dominic Harper was a billionaire businessman known for throwing some of the most exclusive, over-the-top parties in the world. Why would someone like him be reaching out to her? The message was short, direct, and left her more confused than anything. Dear Nadia, you are cordially invited to my wedding next Saturday. Please join us for an unforgettable celebration. There was a link to an RSVP and nothing more. Nadia stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it. She hadn't heard of Dominic personally, but she had read about him in the news, about his huge investments, luxury cars, and private jets. He was the kind of person who was always surrounded by the rich and famous. Nadia? Well, she was far from that world. She had a modest job at a small accounting firm, and her apartment was nothing special. She didn't wear fancy clothes or go to expensive events. So why on earth would someone like Dominic Harper want her at his wedding? For a moment, she thought about ignoring the invitation. It didn't make sense, and she certainly didn't have the confidence to show up at a billionaire's wedding. But curiosity got the better of her. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was an opportunity she'd never get again. With a quick tap on the screen, she clicked the link and RSVP'd. The next few days were a blur of preparation. She didn't have the wardrobe for a fancy event like this. All of her dresses were simple, inexpensive. She browsed a few stores but found nothing that felt right for the occasion. Eventually, she decided on a black dress she already owned, a simple, elegant choice that wasn't too flashy, but would at least look decent. It was the best she could do. The wedding day arrived, and Nadia could hardly believe it. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress one last time. Her stomach was in knots. She had no idea what to expect or what she would even do there. Would she be out of place? Would anyone notice how different she was from the rest of the guests? But the invitation had been clear. She was expected. The venue was located on the outskirts of the city, in a mansion that looked more like a palace than anything she had ever seen. Towering gates greeted guests as they arrived, and the long driveway was lined with perfectly manicured trees. Nadia felt like a fish out of water, but she took a deep breath and walked up to the entrance. This was it. She was about to step into a world she never imagined she'd be part of. The grand mansion loomed before Nadia, its towering columns and sparkling windows making her feel like she was stepping into another world. The sound of music floated from inside, and guests in expensive outfits mingled near the entrance, laughing and chatting in groups. Nadia's heart raced as she stood by the door, feeling like she didn't belong. The shiny black dress she wore felt too simple compared to the designer gowns and tailored suits around her. She almost turned around and left, but something held her back. She had already come this far. As she stepped into the mansion, she was immediately struck by the sheer luxury of everything. The marble floors were polished to perfection, and glittering chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting soft light over the crowd. The air smelled of fresh flowers and expensive perfume. People were laughing and raising glasses of champagne, their faces full of joy and ease. Nadia, on the other hand, felt out of place. She tried to keep a low profile, not drawing attention to herself as she walked through the crowd. She wasn't sure who to approach or where to go. Everyone seemed to know each other, exchanging hugs and shaking hands. Nadia felt like a fish out of water, standing alone by a large vase filled with roses. She sipped her drink and observed the guests, trying to blend in, but it wasn't easy. A group of women in glittering gowns passed by, and one of them gave Nadia a quick glance, her eyes lingering on the simple black dress. Nadia couldn't help but feel self-conscious. As the evening wore on, Nadia found herself at a corner of the room near a long buffet table, nibbling on some appetizers. She looked around, trying to seem like she belonged, but the whispers and sideways glances from the other guests made her feel like an outsider. A couple of women snickered as they walked by, their eyes following her every move. Nadia pretended not to notice, but the sting of their judgment lingered. She was used to being overlooked in the corporate world, but this was different. This was a world of money, power, and fame. She couldn't escape the feeling that everyone around her could tell she didn't fit in. Just as she was starting to feel completely invisible, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "You look a little lost," a man said, standing beside her. Nadia turned to see a tall figure in a sharp suit smiling at her. He had dark hair, a confident presence, and a warm, friendly smile that immediately put her at ease. He didn't look like someone who belonged to the crowd of elite guests. Instead, he seemed genuine, approachable. "I'm fine," Nadia replied, trying to sound confident despite her nerves. "Just taking it all in." The man chuckled. "I know the feeling. I'm Dominic Harper, by the way." Nadia's heart skipped a beat. Dominic Harper, the groom, the billionaire. He was standing right in front of her, talking like it was the most normal thing in the world. She blinked, unsure how to respond. Nadia," she said, still in shock. "It's nice to meet you." Dominic smiled again, this time with a knowing look in his eyes. "I'm glad you could make it. I've heard a lot about you." His words caught her off guard. How could he have heard about her? She was just an ordinary woman, struggling to get by like so many others. As they spoke, the distance between Nadia and the high society she'd never felt part of seemed to shrink. She wasn't just a stranger in the crowd anymore. Suddenly, she was someone he wanted to talk to. The conversation with Dominic was unexpected, but as the evening wore on, Nadia began to feel a little more comfortable. Yet the feeling of being an outsider never fully left her. The guests around her, laughing and chatting, seemed to have little interest in her presence. Some of them threw quick glances her way, and the whispers she'd overheard weren't exactly kind. She noticed a couple of women with overly sharp eyes looking her up and down as they passed by, their laughter ringing in the air. It stung, but Nadia kept her smile in place, trying not to let it bother her. As the night progressed, the sense of discomfort only grew stronger. She overheard one woman whisper to another, "Look at her. What's she doing here?" The words were soft, but they weren't meant to be a compliment. Nadia tried to brush it off, but it was hard not to notice the way the other women would glance at her, exchanging knowing looks as if she were some sort of oddity. The more she stood there, the more she felt like she was being sized up, as if they could tell she didn't belong. As the laughter of the group grew louder, Nadia shifted uncomfortably. She noticed that one of the women, dressed in a sparkling gold dress, was staring directly at her, her lips curled into a small, mocking smile. Nadia tried to ignore her, but the woman continued to look her way. She could almost hear the judgment in the woman's eyes, the unspoken question, "What is she even doing here?" Nervously, Nadia took another sip of her drink, her fingers trembling slightly. She glanced around the room, looking for someone familiar, someone who might offer her a way out of this uncomfortable situation. She saw a few faces she recognized from her work, but none of them seemed to care enough to make their way over to her. Everyone was too busy enjoying the party, too busy enjoying their high-status lives. Then, as she turned to walk toward the buffet, a man in a sharp black suit brushed past her. He didn't apologize for nearly knocking into her, his eyes scanning the room with a look of superiority. He didn't even spare her a second glance, and the harshness of his indifference hit Nadia harder than anything else. It was as if she was invisible, just another face in the crowd, a nobody among the glittering stars of this world. The feeling of alienation was growing too strong to ignore. She wanted to leave, to run away from this world where she wasn't wanted, where her presence seemed so out of place. But something kept her rooted to the spot, some mix of stubbornness and curiosity. Maybe she could prove them wrong, show that she was just as worthy of being here as anyone else. But it was hard to shake the feeling that the mocking stares were all too real. The high-pitched laugh from the woman in gold echoed in her mind. She could almost hear the words again. What is she doing here? The question felt like it had been written all over her face. Just as Nadia was trying to regain her composure, she felt a presence beside her. For a brief moment, she wondered if one of the women from earlier was coming to make another comment, but when she turned to look, she was taken aback. Standing right next to her was none other than Dominic Harper, the groom, the billionaire who had invited her to this extravagant event. He smiled warmly at her, his eyes kind, almost as if he hadn't noticed the awkwardness in the room. "I hope you're enjoying yourself," he said, his voice genuine, without any hint of the formality that surrounded the other guests. Nadia blinked, still surprised that he was talking to her again. Wasn't he busy with his guests? Wasn't he supposed to be caught up in the whirlwind of his wedding day? Yes, Nadia replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. It's amazing. Everything's so beautiful. He nodded, glancing around the room, his expression softening. Yeah, it's hard to take it all in sometimes, isn't it? But hey, I'm glad you're here. I don't think I've met anyone as calm as you in this whole place. Everyone else seems to be in a rush to be someone else. Nadia felt a little taken aback by his words. He wasn't like the other guests at all. He didn't speak with the same arrogance, and he didn't seem to care that she was just another face in the crowd. For the first time since she'd arrived, she felt a little bit at ease. She hadn't expected a billionaire to talk to her like this, not after everything she had overheard. I don't really fit in here, Nadia admitted, feeling the need to be honest. She wasn't sure why she said it, but there was something about Dominic's demeanor that made her feel like she could speak freely. I mean, everyone here looks like they belong. And then there's me, just trying to figure out which fork to use. Dominic chuckled at her words, the sound warm and comforting. Don't worry about that. Honestly, half of these people probably don't even know which fork to use either, he said with a wink. Nadia found herself laughing, the tension that had built up in her shoulders easing for the first time that night. But seriously, Dominic continued, his tone becoming more serious. You don't need to prove anything to anyone here. You're here because I wanted you here, and that's all that matters. Nadia paused. His words were unexpected. Why would you want me here? She asked, still unsure about the whole situation. He looked at her with a slight smile. I've been following your work for a while, Nadia. I admire what you've done. You've built something quietly and powerfully, and that's rare. Most people in this room wouldn't even know how to start something like what you've done. But you've done it without the need for attention, and I respect that. Nadia blinked, unsure whether she had heard him correctly. You know about my work, she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dominic nodded. I do. I've been keeping an eye on your success for a long time. I didn't want to make a big deal about it, but when I saw you walk in tonight, I knew I had to meet you. The words hit Nadia like a wave. Dominic Harper, the billionaire everyone admired, had been following her progress, her small but steady rise in business. It was hard to believe. She had always kept her achievements private, not looking for fame or recognition. But here he was, telling her that he knew of her success, and that he respected it. I'm just an ordinary person, Nadia said, still in shock. Ordinary people can do extraordinary things, Dominic replied with a smile. And you're one of them. Nadia stood there, stunned by what Dominic had just said. She didn't know how to respond. Her mind was racing, trying to piece together what he meant. You've been following my work? She asked again, almost as if she needed to hear it once more to make sure it was real. Yes, Dominic said, his smile never fading. I've seen how you've built your portfolio. You've made smart moves in real estate, tech, even renewable energy. You've managed to do it all without the spotlight, and that's something I find impressive. Most people are desperate for attention, but not you. You've let your work speak for itself. Nadia couldn't believe it. She had always kept her business moves low-key, never wanting the spotlight. Growing up, she learned that success was about hard work and not about showing off. She never imagined that someone like Dominic Harper, someone with so much wealth and influence, would have noticed her efforts. But how? How did you even find out about me? She asked, still unsure of the connection between them. Well, I keep an eye on the business world, especially on people who work quietly but make a big impact, Dominic explained. And you're one of those people. I knew your name before I'd even thought about this wedding. But honestly, I wasn't sure if you'd even show up. When I saw your name on the guest list, I made it a point to find you tonight. Nadia felt her chest tighten. It was almost overwhelming to hear that someone with so much power and wealth had been paying attention to her. The thought that he had followed her career without any grand gestures or public announcements made her realize how different their worlds were. She had built her wealth from the ground up, keeping everything quiet. Dominic, on the other hand, lived in the open, surrounded by luxury and people constantly seeking his attention. I didn't think someone like you would care about what I'm doing, Nadia admitted, looking down at her hands. I thought I thought I was just some small player, you know. Dominic tilted his head slightly, his gaze thoughtful. That's exactly what makes you stand out, Nadia. It's not about how loud you are or how many people notice you. It's about making an impact when others don't expect it. You've done that. His words made Nadia's heart beat faster. She had always felt like an underdog, but Dominic's confidence in her abilities made her see her own success in a new light. Maybe she had been too focused on staying in the background. Maybe it was time to stop hiding her accomplishments and start accepting the recognition that came with them. So, what does this mean? Nadia asked, feeling a bit confused but also curious. Why are you telling me all of this? What do you want from me? Nothing, Dominic said simply, his eyes warm. I just wanted you to know that I see you. And I want you to know that you belong here too. His words hit harder than anything else. Nadia felt a strange mix of emotions, gratitude, disbelief, and even a little bit of hope. For the first time that night, she didn't feel like an outsider anymore. For the first time, someone had recognized her not for her appearance or her social status, but for the work she had done in silence. As the conversation continued, Nadia realized that this moment was more than just a chance encounter with a billionaire. It was a reminder that her journey, no matter how quiet or unnoticed, had value. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't need to keep hiding her success anymore. Just as Nadia was starting to process Dominic's words, the atmosphere in the room shifted. She noticed a small group of people approaching them, led by a woman in an extravagant red dress that shimmered under the chandelier light. Nadia recognized her instantly, Arabella Devereux, one of the wealthiest socialites in the room and a longtime friend of Dominic's. The woman's presence was commanding, and her gaze swept over Nadia before she even spoke. Dominic, darling, Arabella said with a smile that was just a little too perfect. I didn't expect you to be spending so much time with someone like her. Her eyes briefly flicked over Nadia, a thin layer of judgment in her tone. Nadia's stomach dropped. The way Arabella said someone like her made it clear she didn't think Nadia belonged here. The silence that followed was thick, and it felt like everyone was waiting for Dominic to react. Nadia held her breath, unsure if she could handle another moment of being scrutinized. Dominic's smile never faltered. He turned to Arabella with an almost playful expression. Actually, Arabella, I think you'll find Nadia has done more in her career than most people in this room, including some of us. His voice was calm but firm, a stark contrast to the tension in the air. She's a person worth talking to. Arabella didn't seem to appreciate the interruption, but she forced a smile. Of course, she said, her tone dripping with polite sarcasm. But it's just so interesting, isn't it? How some people manage to make their way into these circles without the usual qualifications. The word stung, but Nadia refused to show any weakness. Instead, she straightened her posture and met Arabella's gaze, her own resolve hardening. This wasn't the first time she'd been looked down on for her background, and it wouldn't be the last. She wasn't going to let someone like Arabella define her worth. It's funny, Nadia said, her voice cool and steady. I've always believed that success is more about the work you do, not the circles you belong to. Anyone can show up at a fancy party, but it takes real effort to build something from the ground up. I guess that's something not everyone understands. There was a brief pause. Arabella's smile flickered for a second, her eyes narrowing. It was clear she wasn't used to being challenged so directly, especially not by someone like Nadia. But before the tension could rise any further, Dominic stepped in, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. You're right, Nadia, he said, his voice smooth but with a clear edge. It's about the impact you've made, not the labels people try to stick on you. I think Arabella here might need a reminder of that. Arabella's expression tightened, but she quickly masked it with a forced laugh. Oh, Dominic, always the defender of the underdog. She turned to Nadia, offering a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Well, I'm sure you'll find a way to fit in just fine, if you try hard enough. The subtle jab didn't escape Nadia, but she refused to let it get to her. She had nothing to prove to Arabella, and no matter how much the woman tried to undermine her, she wouldn't back down. She looked at Dominic, giving him a small nod of thanks, but before she could say anything else, Arabella and her entourage drifted away. The brief exchange had left a bitter taste in Nadia's mouth. But it also ignited something inside her, a quiet, burning determination. She wasn't here to be anyone's charity case or underdog. She was here because she had earned her place. And no matter how much people like Arabella tried to make her feel small, she knew she had the power to stand tall. The rest of the night passed in a blur for Nadia. She could feel the weight of the uncomfortable glances and whispers from the other guests, but she tried to ignore them. Dominic had been kind, and that small moment of support had given her the strength to push through. Still, it wasn't easy. The words of Arabella and the others kept echoing in her mind, reminding her of the world she didn't belong to. Yet she kept her head high, even as the night seemed to drag on. Just when Nadia thought she could slip away quietly, hoping the evening would end without any more awkward moments, something unexpected happened. Dominic walked over to her again, but this time there was a look in his eyes, something serious, something different from the easy conversation they'd shared earlier. "Nadia," he said, his voice low, "I need to talk to you about something." His tone caught her attention. "Sure, what's going on?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. He glanced around, making sure no one was close enough to overhear, before leaning in slightly. "This wedding, it's not what it seems. I know I invited you here thinking it would be a fun night, but there's something you need to know. It's part of the reason I asked you to come." Nadia's heart skipped a beat. His words sounded almost urgent, like there was something she was about to learn that would change everything. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic hesitated for a moment, his eyes scanning the room. Then he looked back at her, his expression serious. "This wedding isn't just about a celebration. It's a way for me to hide from a much bigger problem, a problem that could destroy everything I've worked for." Nadia felt a chill run through her. "What kind of problem?" she asked, the question almost slipping out before she realized how personal it sounded. "I can't explain all of it right now," Dominic said, his voice tight. "But I'll tell you this, there are people here who don't have my best interests at heart, people who want to see me fail, and I need help. I've been looking for someone who can understand what's going on, someone who doesn't get caught up in the noise. That's why I reached out to you." Nadia blinked, trying to process what he was saying. She had no idea what kind of trouble Dominic could be in, but there was an undeniable urgency in his voice. It was clear this wasn't just some casual conversation anymore. "You need my help?" she asked, a little shocked. "But why me?" "You're not just anything," he interrupted, his eyes fixed on hers. "You've shown that you have the skills to see through the surface, to recognize what's really going on. That's why I need you." Nadia wasn't sure whether to feel honored or overwhelmed. The idea that someone like Dominic Harper, someone with so much power and wealth, was asking for her help was almost surreal. But there was something in the way he spoke, something genuine, that made her want to listen. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty that buzzed in her chest. He looked at her, his expression softening. "I can't explain everything yet, but trust me, this is bigger than anything you could have imagined. Are you willing to help me, Nadia? Are you ready to take on something that could change your life forever?" The weight of his words hung in the air, and for a moment, Nadia stood there, unsure of what to say next. But then, a strange feeling of clarity washed over her. This wasn't just an ordinary night. This was the beginning of something much bigger, something that could turn everything she knew upside down. She took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm in," she said, her voice firm. "Let's do it." The moment Nadia agreed to help Dominic, she felt a rush of adrenaline. She didn't know exactly what she was stepping into, but she could feel the weight of the decision settling in. Dominic gave her a look of gratitude, but there was still a sense of urgency in his eyes. "Meet me in the study in 5 minutes," he said quickly. "I'll explain everything then." As he walked away, Nadia's mind raced. What could be so serious that Dominic was willing to share it with her? Why had he trusted her, someone who was still learning how to navigate this high society world? She wasn't sure, but the curiosity was too strong to ignore. She had to know. Nadia excused herself from the crowd, trying to act casual as she made her way through the grand hallway of the mansion. The house was eerily quiet now, a stark contrast to the noise of the wedding earlier. She found herself standing outside the study door, taking a deep breath before knocking gently. "Come in," Dominic's voice called from inside. She entered, her eyes immediately locking onto him. He was standing by a large desk, papers scattered in front of him. His expression was tense, and he looked at her with a mixture of determination and worry. The seriousness of the situation hit Nadia even harder now. "Close the door behind you," Dominic said, his voice low. As she did, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. Whatever was going on, it was bigger than both of them. She turned to him, her curiosity getting the best of her. "What's happening, Dominic? What's going on?" He sighed deeply, sitting down at the desk and motioning for her to take a seat. "There's something you need to know about the people here tonight. It's not just a wedding, not just a celebration of me and my fiancée. This is about a deal that went wrong, a business deal that's put me in a very dangerous position." Nadia listened closely, her heart beating faster as Dominic continued. "A few months ago, I got involved in a partnership with some very powerful people. People who are connected to some shady business, things that would ruin me if anyone found out. And now they want me to pull out of the deal, but they're not going to let me do it so easily. They've been watching my every move, and tonight was supposed to be a way to control the narrative, hide the truth for a little longer." Nadia felt a chill run down her spine. "So, the wedding, it's not really about love." "No," Dominic said firmly. "It's a cover. Everything about tonight was planned to keep people distracted while the real business goes on behind the scenes. I need someone who can help me find a way out of this, someone who can think outside the box. That's where you come in." Nadia swallowed hard. This was a far cry from the glamorous wedding she had imagined. This wasn't about a celebration of love or success. It was about survival. "Why me?" she asked again, the question still burning in her mind. "Why trust me?" He met her gaze, his eyes steady. "Because I know you, Nadia. You've done things others couldn't. You've built an empire from the ground up. You're smart, resourceful, and you're not afraid to take risks. I need someone who isn't scared to dive into the mess and get their hands dirty." She could feel the weight of his words. Her entire world had just shifted. She wasn't just some outsider at a lavish wedding anymore. She was about to be part of something much bigger, something that could change her life in ways she never expected. The question wasn't whether she was ready. It was whether she could handle the truth of what lay ahead. "Okay," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "Let's figure this out.